Good morning, everyone. My name is Piotr Bajda, and I am professor of political science at Wyszyńskiego University in Warsaw. And today I will have a privilege and pleasure to moderate our afternoon debate and discussion on solidarity, on a phenomenon for Poles, Czech, and Slovaks, something what was able to link us more than 30 years ago, but it's a question what stay with this kind of common attitude today in wider Europe and in global world. Our meeting is part of the wider project, Heritage of Czech and Polish Dissident Political Thought from the perspective on contemporary crisis, financed by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland in the project Polish-Czech Forum 2020. And the Polish Institute in Prague is our official partner of the project. It is why maybe let's give a floor to Maciej Ruczej, the director of Polish Institute in Prague, just to say a few words and hello to everyone. Maciej, the floor is yours.
Dobry wieczór, dobry wieczór, good afternoon. I'm always kind of hesitant to speak English during Czech-Polish debates, but unfortunately that's the current situation. We are no longer comprehensible to each other, not only in the linguistic sense sometimes. I would like to say that I'm very happy that Ośrodek Myśli, Politycznej, Center for Political Thought in Krakow is pursuing this topic of Czech and Polish dissent, anti-communist opposition, its political thought and its heritage, because it is this heritage, the heritage of the anti-communist dissident movements, which form the basis of Czech-Polish relations, which form a fundament upon which the Central Europe as a place of kind of peaceful cooperation was built in the 90s, and nowadays we find this topic that we are cooperating, that we are peacefully cooperating, as something obvious, but that is not a case in most of our history. This is this heritage of Czech and Polish dissident cooperation in the 1980s, that we can enjoy this unusual level of collaboration between our countries. And what is also important to say, I'm very glad that this discussion addresses the topics which are contemporary. It tries to deal with the heritage of solidarity as a contemporary topic, because as we know, solidarity with small s is one of the key words of current situation in international politics, in European politics, even in our social politics of every day when confronted with the situation of pandemia. So I'm really glad that this discussion is taking place, and wish you a fruitful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maciej. So let me introduce the rest of our guests. And first of all, and at the first place, Mr. Roman Joch, former Czech politics journalist, think tank expert, prime minister advisor, and today the executive director of the Institute for Labour and Family Research Center within the Ministry for Social Affairs of the Slovak Republic. Yes. So, as I suppose, you have moved from Czech Republic to neighborhood Slovakia, and it will be some kind of good opportunity to present your view on Slovak issues as well. So, good evening, Roman.
Good evening. Good evening. In fact, I commute I spent several days per week in Prague. I'm just now at home in Prague. And several days I spent in Bratislava, in Slovakia, as you have mentioned. And I have been asked by the minister before summer to be director of the scientific research institution in Slovakia. So,
Roman, it seems that you are the last Czechoslovak.
Well, in fact, I am, because my father is Czech from Moravia and my mother is Slovak. So definitely I am, in a literal sense, Czechoslovak.
But I hope not the last one.
Oh.
Okay, and our second speaker is Professor Michał Łuczewski, sociologist and academic lecturer of the Warsaw University, and former deputy director of the John Paul II Thought Center in Warsaw. Hello, Michał.
Hello.
Dear guests, let's talk about us. What was happened in Polish-Czech-Slovak relations in recent years? Have we almost forgotten the time of this spontaneous cooperation on something preserved in our relations? Roman, maybe you will be the first.
Well, it's such a substantive issue that it is quite difficult to decide where to start. As have been already said, the relationship between Czechoslovakia and Poland in the 20s and the 30s of the 20th century were not ideal, to put it mildly, were not good. And dissidents in the 80s of the 20th century, when they met each other, I mean Czech, Slovak, Polish dissidents, when they met each other, they thought it was a terrible mistake. It was a terrible mistake. There were misunderstandings. There were even acts of bad will or bad faith from both Czechoslovak and Polish sides. And the consensus of dissidents was that we should never ever again allow to have such a poisoned relationship between Czechoslovakia and Poland. And in those times, few people predicted that Czechoslovakia would split into two nation states. So something like a lesson learned from history was something which united both Czechoslovak and Polish dissidents. And if we look at the last 30 years, of really more than 30 years, we see that never again there was an example of really bad relationships between Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland. So something like a common perception of our shared history has been preserved. It might be even joked that some people proposed in 1990. I remember that for a few weeks there were news that perhaps Poland and Czechoslovakia could form a confederacy. But obviously, confederacy was not formed. We have joined the European Union. All of us are members of the European Union. But we can see something like even more intensive cooperation on the platform of Visegrad 4. So not only Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, but Hungary. Hungary is a part of this community inside the EU. And the impression is that if we support each other, if we share solidarity with each other, it would be much more difficult for stronger powers to the west from us or to the east from us to influence us in the way we don't like to be influenced. So I think that that Polish experts are better at evaluating different Czech governments, different cabinets of ministers, prime ministers, and foreign ministers, whom among them were more let us say, friendly or more keen on intensive cooperation with Poland. My impression is that if we look at recent years, let us say on the last decade, that foreign policy of Platforma Obywatelska, of civil platform, was more ambitious and perceived as their partners rather Germany and France and Britain and maybe even Russia, and not us. We were too small for such an ambitious plan. On the other hand, if we look at the incumbent Law and Justice government, or the government of Law and Justice some 15 years ago, it seems to me that Law and Justice prime ministers and governments were more keen on Visegrad cooperation, meaning also Polish-Czech cooperation. But might be my impression is a little bit incorrect, and if you have other understanding of Polish-Czech relations, please share it with us.
Maybe not alternative view of Polish relations, but before I will let myself to put you another question. Michał, are you able to add something from your perspective as a sociologist, as a scholar who is trying to find trends in such kind of evolution?
I think I can add maybe several thoughts, but I won't venture into just changing the picture in some wholesome manner. I think that Roman just painted it in a good way, although sometimes it's surprising to hear that good words about Polish experts, and also to look at civic platform politics as more ambitious than law and justice politics. But in the final instance, what I see is that what Roman describes is that semi-peripheral place where we are as Central Eastern Europe. So the place between Germany and Russia, or between Europe and Asia, Europe and America and Asia. So this is that very peculiar space where it's very hard to build bridges, not only between countries like our countries, but also within our countries, because we are on the search of capitals, economic capital, cultural capital, moral capital, political capital, and we as semi-peripheral countries, we are not owners of those capitals. So we have to look either at the West, we have to look to the European Union or to Brussels, or at the East, as we did before. And this is the defining factor behind the polarization in our countries, because we have one more ambitious, in Roman's terms, so pro-Western countries at the time when we are ruled by, say, liberal or left-wing parties like Civic Platform, and then we move to that part of Europe, to Central Eastern Europe, and we try to build bridges between our countries, like when rightist parties are in power, or law and justice. So what I want to say that those two facts that were described by Maciej and by Roman, that we do not build those coalitions anymore, and we do not build coalitions within our countries, because we fight. I'm talking now about Poland, because we fight, one could say, for life, so that it's life and death struggle between two parties, is a consequence of our semi-peripheral space we occupy in Poland. And another thought with regard to your, Piotr, intuition that After 1989, there is no collaboration between Poland and the Czech Republic, as well as Slovakia. I think that you can say that on the political level there is cooperation, and like Visegrad Forum, this is what Roman referred to. But what I was struck by is that there are no like friendships, no loyalties, not on the part of ex-dissidents, but on the part of people of my nation. So that it really struck me that bonds of loyalty, of friendship, were what previous generation of dissidents had in common, but we don't longer have. I think that Roman is the only Czech I know, so whenever I have some plea, I always write to Roman. But anyway, we should those contacts, they should be just much more wider, and should be not only political, so they should be informal, they should be cultural. So this is probably what you referred to, Piotr. At least it was my impression when I started visiting Prague several years ago, almost a decade ago, actually, that I saw that, you know, I don't know anybody from the Czech Republic. I think that we should change also that, as you call it, public diplomacy on the part of Polish state, for sure.
I think that Michał has mentioned very one important issue: lack of this contact among people in our countries. Because I have no problem to agree with Roman that we have good intergovernmental relations, and it's amazing improving, especially in compared to our historical experiences from the interwar period. We are together not only within the European Union, Visegrad 4, but also Bucharest 9, etc. So there is a lot of such kind of official reaction and communication. But I would like to put a question to Roman: how is possible to improve this contact between people? How to build these bridges among our societies? Because from my perspective and my experience is that it's quite difficult to find people who is interested not only to visit Czech, Slovakia or Poland, just to find a nice places as a touristic attraction, but there is only a few people interested in understanding what is going on in our societies and how to present it.
I would suggest that youth organizations, either political or apolitical, should be more active in organizing meetings and inviting their fellow partners from other countries for discussions. So that's really an opportunity how to enhance our relations. But there is one puzzle. It's in fact, it's not a puzzle, it's not a mystery, but there is a discrepancy between Poles and Czechs, because those Czechs who admire Poland and Poles admire Poles and Poland for completely different reasons, why many Poles admire Czechs and Czech Republic, Czech society. Those Polophile or Polonophiles among Czechs who admire Poland because of Polish chivalry, honor, martial spirit, fighting against all odds, and rather die in a fight than to surrender. So those of us Czechs who admire these characteristics of Polish history and Polish nature think that we lack in those virtues. That Czech society should be a little bit more like Polish society. That we surrendered too much, perhaps too much, in the 20th century. On the other hand, those Poles I know, not all but many, who live in Prague or who have learned Czech language, they admire Czech society because of its pragmatism, secularism, liberalism. So this is completely different. So I would say Polish liberals are more in love with Czech society, and Czech conservatives are more in love with Polish society. And what to do with that? I really don't know. I don't think it will change anytime soon. This discrepancy, these different reasons for mutual affections will stay with us. But as I have already mentioned, it could really help if youth organizations would meet each other. I remember them many times we tried to organize some youth conference. We had no problems to attract students from Slovakia, Hungary, even Austria, some Balkans, Western Balkans like Slovenia, Croatia. But we had really difficulty to think about whom should we invite from Poland. What youth organizations do exist in Poland? Maybe politicians could advise us. I know that Law and Justice and in Poland and Civic Democratic Party in the Czech Republic, they are members of the same parliamentary group in the European Parliament of European Conservatives and Reformists. But party organizations, party youth organizations are not very popular in the Czech Republic. People who would like to have political ambitions join immediately the party and don't waste their time with making careers in youth organizations. That's very different from, let us say, Germany or Austria, where the path open to political career is either to be a member of youth organization or women federation or agricultural union attached to a particular party. In Czechs, the age of politicians in Czech Republic for the last 30 years since the fall of communism has been much, much younger than was the average of important politicians in Western Europe, in Western democracies.
Thanks. And Michał, are you able to find any kind of good solution from your perspective how to meet these two different groups, pro-Czech and pro-Polish, and with these differences in attitude to life? Or in our Polish case, because there is a huge group of Czechophiles who are trying to read Czech literature and to watch Czech films, even to drink Czech beer. So this group is more focusing on a Czech style of life, how to be cool, and how to be more free than in Poland from their perspective. Is any way how find common ground for these two groups, Michał?
I think that there's a tension, and the one tension you mentioned, the other that was mentioned a little bit tongue-in-cheek by Roman, that conservatives, Czech conservatives, idealize Poland, whereas Polish liberals idealize Czech Republic. But I would also add another tension that there was a little bit mentioned by Roman before, that I think that Poles sometimes imagine themselves as a big country. Maybe we are not a big country, but you know, we used to be a big country. We are in the center of Europe. We are in the heart of Europe. So we don't pay attention to those smaller countries. So there's another dimension. I would say the dimension of we could call it greatness or spaciousness of the country. While on the part of the Czech Republic, that was my impression when I came for the first time there I was so happy. We are Slavs, you know, we are together, and I wanted just to start interacting with some Czechs, and they reminded me, but what about 1968? When you invaded us? And I was just, what? I'm not responsible for Łuczewski, you know? I was not responsible for the communist government, you know, they invaded us. So, but actually, there was, in that comment, there was, I think, something more, I think that there was something deeper, and that was that for some Czechs, we represent, you know, the barbaric East that is invading, you know, those democratic countries. So we might think that we are a bigger nation, but I think many Czechs think that they are on the right side of history, meaning that they are on the West, on the democratic side, and they are in danger of being invaded by barbaric Poles and some hordes from the East. So there's also, I think, the tension as well between our countries. I think that we can answer your question, Piotr, maybe on two levels. One level is a level just of management, and the other is a personal level. I will start with the personal level. I think that, like in my work at the university, I try to introduce Czechoslovak perspective on the plate. So, for example, every year we are watching a movie called Obchod na Korze. I hope that it's so Shop on the Main Street. And we are watching it with Polish students, but also with students from all over the world, because they attend my seminar on the sociology of cinema. And I think that after such a movie, everybody has a different approach to our countries, and also to spiritual heritage of our countries. I watched Obchod na Korze just 1 week ago, and one of Polish students said that she's extremely moved by that movie, and I think it's very rare among students now to be moved by anything in the age of Netflix. So I think that from starting with what we can do, is just to show a bit we know of culture of some other countries, neighboring countries, and not to be so obsessed with the West, you know, with the Brussels or with the East. We have much to share between each other. And by the way, we also used to watch Kolia or Kola. And by the way, I was struck by spiritual dimension that was encrypted in those movies, like the unbearable lightness of being. That it's also like a theological treatise. So I'm always struck that those liberal, progressive Western Czechs have more spiritual culture than we have in their most prominent works of art. I think that in Poland we try to hide our Catholic or in more general terms Christian and religious heritage. So that's to make a long story short, we should share culture with our students, with young people, but we should also be exposed to the culture of our friends from Czech Republic. But on management level, I'm a great admirer of one arcane American theologian, Henry Nelson Wyman. He's not known, but Martin Luther King wrote a PhD on Henry Nelson Wyman. And Wyman develops in his theology vision of creative interchange. And that vision of creative interchange, so that creative meeting between us entails 4 elements. First element is interacting. So we have to interact to become creative. So we have to see somebody. We have to go to the Czech tavern. We have to drink the Czech beer. I myself went during COVID time to Kraliki to have a according to Magda Gessler, the best golonka in the world, so the best knuckle in the world. And you know, I just went there with my youngest daughter. She was 5, so you know, you have to interact with those people. And when I asked actually in Kraliki how long would we wait for that knuckle, for golonka, the waiter answered that in Polish. He answered in Polish, aż nadejdzie śnieg. So he used that kind of you know, very funny reference that we have to wait for winter. So interaction, I think interaction is great. We were also driven by forest service, just very high in the mountains. So you know, I think those small interactions for my 5-year-old would change her vision of Czech Republic forever. So for her, Czech Republic is just, you know, the word of golonka and of great people. So the first thing is interaction. The other thing is appreciation. So we have to learn to appreciate our vision, and also I would say even appreciate our polarization. Appreciate that you know, this is the space of Europe. When we have liberals and we have conservatives and they are fighting like hell. They want to kill one another. I try to appreciate it because, you know, sometimes it seems an avant-garde of the world. So, you know, that polarization that will beset everybody. Even somebody, I think that was some liberal from Gazeta Wyborcza said that is imitating Jarosław Kaczyński. So that polarization in the US was our Polish export product. So once we appreciate that, we can integrate it. So we can integrate those different elements, and then we can expand. We can go further. So, I think that this is the process that neatly describes our spiritual development. That we have to appreciate all elements in our soul, and you know, we have to see our shadow. We have to appreciate. We have to integrate all those elements, and then we can expand, we can move further to transform something. So these are those 4 elements of creative interchange, and I think of all creative encounters between us.
Thank you, Michał. I think that you have touched a very important thing, that in fact we need interaction not only to be a consumer of our cultures, but culture. I agree that it's one of the most important track how to meet each other. But question is, there is any chance for our national culture to be attractive in other countries? It means, my experience when I was almost at the same position like Maciej Ruczaj, when I was program director of the Polish Institute in Bratysławie in 2000-2004, and then I tried to organize some attraction concert for people in Bratysławie, and when I put a question, who would be some kind of good attraction to mobilize people to meet and to attend this concert, my partner said Maryla Rodowicz. It means that it was something from prehistoric period. So for me, it was some kind of evidence that in fact we cut this cultural contacts, what we had before '89. And in this place, American culture or Western culture dominate, and there is no place for exchange of culture among us. There is definitely a closed door, or is possible to find some good way and good idea how to try to find some kind of niche. Roman?
Well, American culture is pervasive and has almost hegemonic position in many countries of the world. But I realized, well, several during Michal's remarks, I realized several memories. First, I know really few people who blame Poland or Hungary or Bulgaria for '68 invasion. Most rational people realize that those were orders from the Soviet Union, from Kremlin. And there is another one who is hated next to Brezhnev, and that's Walter Ulbricht, because Walter Ulbricht in former Eastern Germany was extremely rabid and unhinged in his denunciations of the reform communism of '68. But few people would blame Poland or Hungary or Bulgaria for the invasion. Second, as you mentioned, the spirituality of Czech culture. Well, yes, we don't have in this secular society such a strong spirituality among people in religion. So people try to find spirituality somewhere else. If they are not believers, and many are not believers, they try to find spirituality or meaning in life in culture or in arts. For Czech society and even for Slovak society up to a point, actors, movie actors and theater actors were something like a moral authority. For secular people, those were not bishops, those were not clergy, but those were the guys and girls and ladies and gentlemen whom they watched on TV, whom they observed sometimes in the theaters, and for them those were the moral authority. So when the November Velvet Revolution started, the November 17th, the day of the demonstration and beating of the students, that was Friday. It was Friday in 1989. So when actors on Saturday and especially on Sunday refused to play their roles, but just started to protest that brutality, and had something like a dialogue with theater goers, that was perhaps the one of the first signs that the regime is going to collapse. When actors were even on Czechoslovak television were refusing to act, but had some political proclamation and people watch them. So that was one of the first signs that the regime is going to lose, and some radical reforms must come. So I don't know if there is any other country where actors have such a high reputation, such moral status of a moral authority. Normally, actors are not especially moral people. But in the communist years, we didn't have any tabloids. So now we know everything about scandals of actors and singers and so on. We know that those actors and singers are not especially moral people or especially supra average than other people. But during communist years, of course, there were no tabloids, no information about their personal lives. Few people knew them personally, but they observed them as actors, as people who acted, who played distinguished personalities in both in theaters and in movies. So by default, they had a considerable moral authority. I don't think they have the same moral authority as they used to have, but still it's amazing that for many ordinary Czech people, the opinion of their favorite actors is something like something which they pay attention to. So they perceive them like in normal society, people perceive bishops or clergy or university professors, teachers. In the past, the high authority was among university professors. That has changed, because the schools were communized. No dissident anti-communist professors were allowed at universities. So actors replaced university professors as moral authority in a secular society of the Czech Republic.
Yeah, but we are still discussing about dissidents before '89. And do you think that our mistake was not to move down this good feeling among dissidents to society, to other groups of interest? In fact, in our Polish-Czech-Slovak relations, we have only isolated and interested in each other. So we have fantastic tradition of movement of solidarity, Polish, Czech, Slovaks, but it was located in southern part of Poland. I'm afraid that from people from Szczecin or Gdańsk, Czech Republic or Slovakia is a land far, far away. And it is why I put this question: how to use culture as a channel to popularize our nations, to animate any kind of events, meetings, etc. Because I'm afraid that Jaromir Nochavica is not enough, and what we are able to do more. Okay, you mentioned about youth. Michał mentioned about students, but any kind of interest of our governments could be helpful or not.
Well, it could be helpful, but if something is too official, people would be less trustworthy, would be more reluctant to have doubts if something is more official. So I would rather recommend informal meetings among students, among youth organizations, rather than something organized by dignitaries, officials, diplomats, ambassadors. And you are right that, well, the Polish-Czechoslovak solidarity, that was very elite thing. It was a project of dissident elites, but had few analogies among normal ordinary people. So the Czechoslovak Polish feeling of solidarity, that we are in the same boat, and we fight the same oppressor, that was very elite thing. But for normal Czechs, Slovaks, for them, Poles were not very different from Hungarians, from Ukrainians, Belarusians, maybe other nations from the Eastern Bloc. So there was few people were not able to differentiate sufficiently among other nations in Central Eastern Europe. For most people, all those nations were, well, more or less the same. We have the same rulers, Soviets and communists. So the differences among us are not so large, so important. Probably now the situation is better because people were able to travel abroad, to visit many different countries. So now people perhaps have a better understanding of different national characteristics and features and natures of different peoples, nations in Central Eastern Europe.
Thanks. And Michał, as a sociologist, maybe you are able to find a way how to build common boat. And especially in this context of polarization of our societies, is this possible?
Mm-hmm. I think that we are in the common boat regardless whether we want it or not, and regardless whether we see it or not. So we are in the common boat, and those ties of solidarity between us, anyway, we might not see them, but we depend on one another. And I'm here referring to Visegrad countries, but also to Czechs and to Poles. I think that maybe we could, sometimes as sociologists, we tend to intellectualize world. So we are too much focused on ideas, on ideologies, on polarization, but maybe we should start with something that is more carnal, what is more embodied. And recently I was reading Hrabal's book, Czuły barbarzyńca. I don't know what's the Czech title. And Hrabal is describing his friendship with Vladimir Boudnik. I hope that I also pronounce his name well. And I was struck, I sent it actually to Maciej, I was struck that when they went to taverns of Prague, they would wash in beer. So they would take beer and then they would pour their beer on their beards and on their hair. And for me that was, wow, we have to try it. So we don't have to intellectualize the world, but we can see something that is embodied, that opens up, that opens us for an adventure. And next time when I go to Prague, I want to wash my beard. I will grow my beard, and I want to have my beard washed in good Prague beer, because this is what classics like Hrabal and Boudnik used to do. But it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. With regard to solidarity and with regard to culture, what we can do, I would say we have to answer what is. So why we should actually refer to culture? Only because culture responds to some our desires, our needs. So we have to find those needs. Why Poles should reach out to Czech culture and vice versa. We can do it to reinforce our types, and maybe that's too radical. But maybe we can search for other countries' corroboration of our identities. Like conservative Czechs will become even more conservative once they come to Poland, and liberal Poles will be even more liberal when they come to the Czech Republic. But I don't see that this is the best way, because we are not on that path of transformation. We become who we are. So we become more of who we are. And I don't know whether this is a good strategy. The other strategy is just to be an expert on the Czech Republic or be an expert on Poland. So in that way, we build our authority, our say scholar status. And that might be a way for some, but I don't think that this is the way. There can be also like professional Czechophiles and professional Polonophiles who write books and they show who Czechs really are, or who Poles really are. But then they are for the most part they are also building their own status as Czechophile or as Polonophile. And my idea is that maybe we can go beyond our identities, beyond our social capital, beyond our status, prestige, our political ideology, to search for ways and instruments of transformations, of our internal transformation that is inscribed in our culture. So let me be more clear. I think that all cultures, when we read them in depth, they are about, like in Campbell's terms, like a hero's journey. So they serve us to come to terms with our finitude, with our mortality, with our love, with our friendship. So this is what is culture. It moves us beyond our just immediate desires. And when I'm reading Czech culture, I'm trying to read it that way, so that I can change. And then I can also discover, and I can also show it to students, that under capitalism, when you are and when you are all the time on TikToks and Facebooks, you are losing your mind. You are anxious all the time. You don't have any anchors. So this is the time when you have to start cultural life, life of culture that will serve, that will make you sane in that deranged world. And when you read Patočka, for example, when he wrote, actually he also used the term solidarity of the shaken. You see a man who tries to find a spiritual man within him. So Patočka wants to find that inner man, and I think that that he could take it from St. Paul to find the inner man, to find the spiritual man. When he is able to witness and to be a martyr, when he wants to engage in politics, I think that you have a witness of somebody who knows what is life, what is violence, what is war, and you can learn from him so that you can become a better person, so that you can also learn from the journey Patočka had, and also Havel. Although I know that Havel is controversial in Czech Republic, I know that, but you can use culture as a tool, or maybe culture can use you as a tool to make you sane, so that you are not lost, so you don't lose your soul under capitalism, and in that anxiety and that rivalry on social media. We need our culture, and for me, Patočka, and I think that for many, or maybe not many, but for my students, I was able to show them that you have to read that guy, because this is the way you can lead your life now, and you can find your own spiritual man with Patočka or with Havel. Yeah, so I would say that we have to find the problem the culture is an answer to. And I think that the problem of today's world is the problem of anxiety, of being lost, that we are losing the meaning of life. We don't know what it is. This is a question also of rivalry. And what we have to do is to show that, this is culture. You have to be immersed in your culture. Otherwise, you will be lost in social media. But you cannot use culture in an instrumental way. You should be used by culture. You should let you be a part of that, creative interchange of generation after generation of Poles and Slovaks and Czechs and Ukrainians who try to come to terms with their life. And we can learn from them much more than from celebrities or from actors. So this is my answer.
Thanks, Michał. I like your statement that we need our culture, but I'm afraid how culture will be looked in near future, especially when you mentioned about polarization, when we are able to observe what is going on, not only because of pandemic situation, but we are trying to find any kind of links, bridges among our nations, but what is possible to observe that it's quite difficult to build bridges among our societies. If we are observing what is going on, what was happened last years, there is some kind of generation tension. It means what was able to observe in Slovakia mass young protests after murder of Jan Kuciak, a huge movement, milion chwilek pro-democracy in Czech Republic, what we are observing today in Poland. There is something danger in my stories, in my opinion. Are you able to comment it, Roman, Michał?
It's difficult to evaluate respective merits of mass demonstrations, what impact they are going to have. Are there going to be transitory phenomena, or are they going to have something consequential as their results? It's really difficult to know beforehand. But I would agree that we have one generational problem, or at least one generational problem. The one has been already mentioned. Young people spend much more time on Facebook and internet than we did when we were young, because when we were young there was no internet, no Facebook, and we read books. I am afraid that these young people today who are 18, 20 years old, that they read not so many books as we read when we were those 30 years younger. And another generational problem, of course, that's their role for parents, that's their role for responsible parenthood, that parents should persuade their children to read books, worthy books, and develop a love for books. The other generational problem is that we, in the late 80s, early 90s, we were in a simpler situation. We knew who were the good guys, simply speaking us, and who were the bad guys, the regime, communists. And people appreciated courage in the face of oppression, courage in rejections of tyrannical police methods, brutality, and so on. However, it seems to me that for young people today, it's very difficult to realize that many popular and modern ideologies have some unpleasant implications, implications which are contrary to human free spirits. And many people think that if some trend, political trend or ideological trend, comes from the West, then it must necessarily be a good one, a liberal one, a free-thinking one. And they don't realize that people could succumb to crazy ideologies, not, of course, to the same ones. I don't expect in my lifetime that fascism, Nazism, communism will be again strong ideologies. I don't think so. They will be strong. People have learned their lessons from those ideologies, but other ideologies could come which will use the talk and the speak of liberation, personal autonomy, or protection of environment, of worthy causes, and few people will resist the impulse to evaluate those demands and those ideologies with a critical way. They can become very seductive, and if my fellow friends of the same age share them and consider them as a worthy causes, so they must be good and I must support them as well. So I am afraid that something like an ability to detect potentially dangerous ideas and policies when they are still not so visible, that ability cannot be learned so in the easier way as those of us who remembered oppressive totalitarian regime. So it seems to me that people who are younger than 30 years old never had any experience with a brutal regime. Maybe some who have traveled abroad to Belarus or to some other countries with dictatorial regimes, but people living in a free society, I might be mistaken. Maybe that's something like a lamentation of a middle-aged man, maybe so. But it seems to me that the immunity to proto-totalitarian viruses and ideas is lower among the people who have never experienced totalitarian regime in their lifetime. But of course, the resistance to bad ideas is something which will never end, and it's a task, is a duty for every new generation. So every new generation must struggle with temptations from bad ideas which look as great ideas, and must learn why they are in fact bad and not as great as they seem to be.
Thanks. Before I will give Michał the floor, let me add to my question another factor. Michał, do you think that the protest of young generation, what we are able to observe in our region, is just simply postpone of the same trend what was possible to observe in Western Europe in the late 16th because of our peripheral status and because of communist regime, or there is something new, specific, unique in such kind of movements?
I take that you are referring to movements to that Polish women's strike that is actually run by young people who summoned up on TikTok and were summoned up by celebrities. I think that it will be a consequential movement, that there will be, and there is already a wave of secularization among the young. Although, in my perspective, that secularization is actually producing a new religion. So we are exchanging old rites of Catholicism for new liturgies of modern times, and that religion is a religion of transgression. In anthropological terms, we call transgression ritual. So that religion we are witnessing now in Poland, that is emerging among us, is a religion of transgression, where sexuality is shown to the world, when aggression is something that is not only acknowledged by legitimized, where hatred is something that is legitimized by Polish elites. And this is ritual. So we do what under conditions of law and of taboos we were not allowed to do. What was banned under lockdown is now holding reign in Poland. So what was banned is now legitimized and is favored and is actually encouraged by Polish elites. But also among the youth, and it seems as if you took some Facebook feed or TikTok just right to this, and people are also in rivalry to show whose slogan is the smartest one. So there is also a hidden rivalry between those people who seemingly protest against the totalitarian government, And I think I understand that type of religion. I think that this is a kind of human universal that in all societies we will find that kind of religion. And I think that I can say as a Catholic, although I converted to Catholicism, that I also have those desires just to be, you know, totally emancipated, free of my gender, you know, of my orientation, of those civilizational rules of debate. You know, I also want to swear. So I think that there's that aggressive part in all of us. But culture is about interacting with that aggressive part, about acknowledging, but more importantly, about integrating that aggressive part and expanding, so we can move forward with that part. We can move forward. In religious terms, we call it conversion. But with ritualistic religion, the problem is that we mistake our soul, our spiritual inner man, to use Patočka's phrases, for that aggressive part. We sometimes say, "I'm pissed off," and as you know, as if it meant, you know, that it's very serious. You know, you are just giving rein of your soul to aggression. You should incorporate aggression. You should see your shadow. So the problem with that contemporary religion is that it gives space only for aggression, and it doesn't see that people are aggressive not only against the bad government, but they are in a hidden way aggressive with one another. And you know, you remember probably how Marta Lempart, who is the leader of those strikes, what she said actually to Szymon Hołownia, who wanted to support those strikes. She was even more cruel to somebody who wanted to support her than to Jarosław Kaczyński. So there is that hidden rivalry all the time in play that is covered by scapegoating of the government, by finding the one who is responsible for that. So in general, I think that social media are encouraging that type of ritual. They're encouraging aggression, sexual transgressions. They encourage experiments on our bodies, but they are not the right solution for that. So they show what is in us, but they cannot help us coming to terms with those negative sides of ours. And I think that the true culture we can find in our countries is a culture that helps us overcome polarization. That is culture that is not necessarily supporting, you know, law or law and justice, but is supporting love. That is supporting, you know, conversion. That is supporting empathy. And in the final instance, that is supporting what I call, after one American rabbi whose family came from Poland, non-anxious presence. So when we can be in the social chaos, when we can be present, when we can understand that, but we are not taken by that chaos, we are not taken by those, you know, rivalries. We are non-anxious. We are not afraid, just like John Paul II encouraged us to do. So I think that in the final instance, non-anxious presence is a product of a true culture, and we need that non-anxious presence more than ever before.
Thanks, Michał. But let me repeat one part of my question. Do you think that is just something that's the same what was observed in the Western Europe, or there is and just postponed in our region because of these factors, or because of the new techniques, new media, it's something originally. It's something unique.
I think that the question is great. In 1968, in that part of Europe, we had Soviet tanks, and we had March 1968 in Poland. So our 1968 was 1968 in the name of freedom, not sexual freedom, not ritualistic freedom, but freedom of our countries, independence. It was in the name of the common good of our nations. It was also in the name of patriotism. Like Adam Michnik, he discovered what is patriotism. He stopped being socialist. So our 1968 was just something different than 1968 in the West. On the other hand, I think that now the European empire, moral empire, is run by the generation of 1968. And I think that that our youth, they know that there is the empire, and that empire all the time tells us what's good and what's evil. So it's not that they are just spontaneous strikes or protests, but they know that they are in line with the Western culture. So I think that 1968 generation infiltrated, or maybe not infiltrated, because because of the generation, the European empire is imbued with that transgressive ritualistic religion. This is our official religion of the EU. That is also sensed by Polish young men and women, by Polish youth in general, and their protests are in line with the wishes and the official religion of Europe. So this is one link with 1968, I see. The other link would be that in 1968, also in America, but also in Europe, the protests took place in the most progressive but also richest universities. It meant that these were students from best families. And those students who came from privileged families, they were chanting Nazis, Nazis to the police, who were representing children of the proletariat, of the working class. And I think that something similar, we see that those protests are, for the most part, run by Polish intelligentsia and students, or as they call themselves, patho-intelligentsia, so pathological intelligentsia. I think there's much right in their self-description. And they are chanting Nazis, Nazis, maybe not still Nazis, to the children of the proletariat or the working class, to the Polish police. And the Polish police is shown as, extremely barbaric and brutal. So that would be another link with 1968, that class distinction between protesters and those whom they fight. And in the final instance, I think that what is different between those protests is that in Poland, because we are so Catholic, those protests, they become rabidly anti-Catholic. So for example, Polish churches are attacked. And I think in that sense, we see also much clearer religious dimension of contemporary phenomena, pagan religious dimension of contemporary phenomena. That on the one hand, you have a religion, you have a Catholic religion that is very passive, that is actually very stale. On the other hand, you have that ritualistic religion that is very archaic and energetic, full of passions, that is sucking in everybody, including my colleagues from my university, who are just giving, thousands of rationales and justifications why we can be brutal and aggressive. Although, you know, those justifications would be unthinkable 1 month ago. They were not politically correct. But now what you see is that you have that explosive, archaic religion that is in place, that is seeking scapegoats. Scapegoats are churches now in Poland. I don't want to judge that culture, that ritualistic religion. I just want to show that maybe there are good reasons behind protests, but there is no telos for those protesters. They don't know where to head. They don't know what to do. They know what to destroy, but they don't know what to do. And maybe they don't know. I'm taking that from Patočka. I'm taking this from Patočka. That we are, when we are on the front, when we are polarized, actually, there's a hidden bond between those two parties who are fighting a life and death struggle. And I think this is also a very Christian way to see that people who are fighting with us are actually so anxious as we are, as anxious as we are. And anxiety and fear, this is what we have in common. And therefore, we can build that solidarity of the shaken between parties over the front. But that ritualistic religion doesn't see that. They see only enemies, and they cannot pray for enemies. They cannot forgive us. And I think that this is not dangerous, but this is unfortunate, I think. And this is very unconscious, because really, my part doesn't know, you know, what she wants and what she wants to achieve. There's not love there, that's for sure.
Roman, let me ask you: are you able to observe some kind of the same intergeneration tension in Czech or Slovak Republic, maybe linked with another part of social life?
Well, I would still, when I think that I cannot be surprised with anything new, then I am surprised by something new. For example, what was something amazing for me was the massive hysteria on campuses in the United States. I have always thought that only continental Europeans could get crazy, like French during the French Revolution, or Italians during fascism, or Germans during Nazism, and Czechs after World War II, when we flirted with communism. We thought that communism would be good for us, or at least too many Czechs thought that in that way. And I have always taken for granted that English-speaking people, Anglo-Saxons, are more pragmatic, less ideological, and less susceptible to waves of passions and madness. But what we have seen on the campuses and in the streets of the United States since the last week of May, since the killing of Gordon Floyd, that's something like that's not only ideology, Black Lives Matter and the whole woke culture. That's not only ideology, it is ideology, but it is, as Michał has said, it's a new religion. It's a secular religion with its own rituals, with its own prayers, with exorcism, chanting meaningless slogans like white silence is violence. Well, of course, to be silent, there are situations when to be silent is to be a coward, but silence is not violence. It's very different phenomenon than violence. And when I look at us, at Central Europeans, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, people from the Baltic states, Hungarians, it seems to me that our young people, our students, are less hysterical now than their fellow students in English-speaking countries, especially in the United States. So even I can lament that the young generation now has not experience of living at least a week or a month under a communist regime, I still must say that it seems to me that our young people are still much more rational and less subservient to ideologies than are just now this year young people in the United States. So I would not claim that our young people are among the most stupid or fanatical. No, they are not.
Neither me. And there is the last chance for our audience to put a question, because of course we would be able to debate next a few hours on this civilization issue, but not to lengthen our discussion, I have my question for this afternoon discussion to both of you. Are you able to find any way, there is any chance for conservatives to be more attractive for young people, to be cool? Or we are just the last generation for whom the values matter?
This is a question for us or to our audience?
It's the question to both of you, and you are free to start, and maybe there will be another question from the audience, but let's move.
Yeah, I think that no, we are not the last generation. There will be always values. There will be always spiritual life. I think also that that generation that becomes so volatile, so anxious, actually suspicious of values and of law and of John Paul II and of what we represent. Actually, those characteristics of that population, of the generation, are, I think, the signs of testing us. So this is how I treat it. They want to test us. And sometimes we cannot pass that test because we don't have those values. We don't have that spiritual life. We just, say slogans about law and justice. So I think that generation, and I think that we have to pass the test. We have to keep the treasure of solidarity, of spiritual life, so that the next generation can get to know that. And on the other hand, I think that the next generation needs values, needs spiritual life, inner man, much more than we do, because we were brought up in the culture that was more or less stabilized. As Roman said, these were bad guys and we are good guys. You can listen to that actor, you can listen to John Paul II. So our culture was much more structured, and it gave us much more safety. And then you could just be, you could have your own problems, but everybody around you would support you somehow. There was always, grandma who would tell you, this is wrong what you are doing. And now that generation, they don't have culture as something that is supportive of them. And it means that they have to, because they have that ritualistic kind of religion, new secular type of religion. And this is the moment when they need true culture much more than we did. We could live without culture because we could just pretend that we live a good life. They cannot. They are totally lost with regard to their sexual orientations, to their ideologies, to climate change. They don't know what to do. They don't know what they should drink. They don't know what they should eat. They don't know. They feel all the time guilty because there is a climate change. And this is the moment where they need culture. That means morality. That means religion, true religion, much more than we did. So we have to just to give them. We have to give them, or they have to find it by themselves.
Roman, please.
I agree that we are not the last generation of conservatives, of conservatism. In every age, there will be some conservatives. Many young people who just now don't think about themselves as about conservatives will one day realize and learn that they in fact are conservatives. There are many ways to conservatism. Some are religious and spiritual. That's more typical for continental Europe. Others are more aesthetic. That was the case of late Sir Roger Scruton. He was a conservative for aesthetic reasons. And some are political. People will realize that some of the changes, some of the trends popular now will not have such beneficent results, and those people will then resist those changes and reforms in wrong directions. So they realize and will be conservatives. And one of Czech conservatives are those who now claim that we want to conserve free society. We want to conserve what we have last 30 years, 31 years. We would like to preserve and conserve that. So that's why we are conservatives, because we love freedom. And ideologies might come and go. Every age will have some popular ideologies, but those ideologies will be wasted, will be spent, will be abandoned eventually. However, conservatives will be always with us, because there will be always something to conserve, something to preserve. So we might not win every political battle, but we know that we are immortal. We conservatives will never die. Conservatives will always be in every decent society.
So I think that it's a good time to finish our discussion with this optimistic opinions and attitude. Maciej, could you like to summarize and to sum up our discussion?
By no means I would like to summarize or sum up. It's too difficult a task. I just would like to say that, I mean, we started with kind of usual complaints that Czechs and Poles don't know each other enough, they don't like each other enough, which is a kind of usual topic in Czech-Polish discussions. And I'm very glad that we ended up with a discussion on completely different issues, and issues which are more general and more universal. And in my perspective, that's the way we should do it, because in the times of solidarity, this solidarity with capital S, we were together and we felt together, not because we liked each other so much, but because we had common emotions and we had common goals, and we were in the common, let's say, emotional realm at that period. So if our discussion ends with a kind of confirmation that now we are again on a common boat, meaning that we share the same anxieties and we share the same problems, that be it the polarization, be it the kind of return of class distinctions, dressed in the kind of codes of cultural wars, be it the anxiety of young generation. That's probably the way, because then we start discussing the issues which are common, even if they are not exactly kind of Polish-Czech relation, but that's something we should discuss in order to find out our own answers, but in a kind of common discussion. So for me, this is the optimistic end, that we have the same problems. So then there's some future in Czech-Polish public debates. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you. I think that optimistic is that this debate was funded by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Czech-Polish Forum, and with support of Polish Institute in Prague. I would like to thank our audience, but first of all, let me put my thanks to Roman and Michał. It was a great pleasure for me to discuss with you this evening, and I hope we'll be able to continue it maybe in another condition after COVID disaster. Thank you very much. And
I also want to thank Maciej, Roman, and Piotr, and I just want to reinforce what Roman said, that we will never die.
Well, thank you. Thanks.